Welcome everyone to this Newzoo webinar on the state of PC and console gaming in 2024. It's great to see so many of you here today. Thank you for joining. I see some more people joining. Today, the webinar will be around 25 minutes, and we will have 5 minutes for Q&A afterwards. I am Diego Rondon. I am the Director of Market Analysis and Consulting at Newzoo. I work with my team on the annual games report, as well as industry insight pieces like the one you're going to be seeing today. In consulting, we also work very close with clients in various topics such as total addressable market, revenue forecasting, and of course, game turbulence. With me in the chat is Michael Wagner, one of our senior analysts. And Michael will be answering most of your questions as they come, and he will be saving a few for me in the end. So first off, let's start with a quick introduction. So Newzoo is the leading PC and console data provider. It is worth mentioning to you that everything that you're going to be seeing today, so the analysis and metrics, this all draws from the Newzoo platform, more specifically from our game performance monitor, which is our platform title level tracker. So think of engagement and revenue, MAU, ARPU, those kind of metrics, and of course, some of the market sizing data we have in our forecasting product. So what should you expect today? I will be going on through 3 different topics. We will start with a PC and console market outlook. Here we will talk about playtime as well as revenue. Then moving on to the central topic of today, gamers are clocking in fewer playtime hours. So we will explore together, are they clocking in fewer hours? And if that is the case, where are those hours going? Because that's probably the most important part. And last but not least, we will explore some areas of opportunity. So we will look at some recent successes and some breakout titles in the market. So with that, let's go into our PC and console market outlook. And when we look at player growth, new player growth will slow down for the PC and console market in the coming years. It is worth mentioning that we define a player as anyone who has played a game on PC or console in the past 6 months. Looking at the data, historically from 2018 to 2021, growth rate of the player base was significantly higher than what we are observing nowadays. Actually, at the peak of the pandemic in 2021 and after, post-COVID growth is increasing, but this has definitely slowed down. And when we look at towards 2026, so into the forecast that we do see about 100 million new players coming into the market. That being said, nothing is on the horizon to really expand the pie or grow this substantially as we have seen in the past. So with this in mind, it's important that when you look at growth, you think that mature markets are going to be growing at a lesser extent than developing markets such as Latin America, Middle East, and Africa. Looking at revenue, revenue follows a similar pattern in the sense that the previous years experienced a lot of traction. So from 2015 to 2021, the market actually grew by 50%. 2021 to 2023 actually showed us something different. For actually the first time since we report on revenue, the market had a decrease. Now, looking ahead into 2026, the forecast for the PC and console market is to reach $107.6 billion. This is, of course, with a more moderate compounded annual growth rate of 2.7%. And here, the main driver of growth will be console. And we foresee that for the next 3 years, mainly because console will be hitting the tail end of its current generation cycle. So what this means is we will be hitting peak install base. There will be a larger library of next-gen content, so new games for these platforms. And this will create a shift of budget or a share of wallet, if you may say so, towards more software. As a side note, of course, Nintendo Switch 2 is in the horizon, not confirmed yet. But we typically see that when Nintendo Switch comes out, it comes alongside tentpole franchise titles. So we do anticipate that this will drive sales overall. In summary, when you think of the PC and console market outlook, player growth has slowed down, and revenue will grow mostly from the peak install base of console. Next, we will come into the second section of today's webinar, and this is a deep dive analysis on playtime hours. Are gamers actually clocking in fewer playtime hours? And what does this mean for the industry? So, gamers are clocking in fewer playtime hours. On average, quarterly playtime is down by 26% since 2021. And this is huge. Q1 2021 was at the peak of the COVID pandemic. Many people were on lockdown. During these times, people search on new ways of entertainment, and that was games. Looking down the graph into Q3 2023 and Q4 2023, this trend might signal that we are slowing down, we're flattening on the decrease. However, our data suggests that we are not there yet at the bottom. And there are a couple of reasons behind this. First is that typically you would expect a Q4 uptick because of course, of holiday season, and there's more time for more investment in games, more time to play games. And that was really not present in Q4 2023. Moreover, we already have an earlier indication of our Q1 2024 numbers in playtime is actually below. It has decreased 7%, approximately 7% year on year. So this signals that we haven't reached yet the bottom. Fortunately, there's an upside to this, and that is that earlier indications of revenue per hour actually dictates that this is increasing, which means that, yes, we're losing a lot of playtime hours. However, this might be the casual gamers that were exiting games or playing less. And this might signal that core players are still very much invested and very much wanting to play games. Now, we will look at playtime per title. And when you look at this, 66 titles accounted for 80% of the total playtime in 2023. We went back and looked at the previous 2 years to see if this trend was, a different spike or something else. And actually, this trend stays relatively consistent, which means that with varying 1 or 2 titles, this means that most playtime is captured or very concentrated in few titles. Moving on, we wanted to take a closer look at playtime hours across titles, but this time to observe if we can find more trends within these titles. So what we prepared is an analysis where we broke down playtime into 3 distinct categories. So we did this for the year 21, 22, and 23. So for all of these years, we took the total playtime and we broke it down into 3 separate categories. The first category that you will see up there is games that are less than 2 years old. So think your Baldur's Gate 3. Titles that are 3 to 5 years old that we're calling, so think of a Valorant. And titles that are 6+ years old. So think of a Minecraft. During this webinar, you will be hearing me referring to the new titles, 2 years old, less than 2-year-old titles as new, 3 to 5-year-old titles as middle-aged or something like that, and the older titles as mature games. So immediately, when we look at how the data plotted, we can observe that there's a trend, and that is mainly reflected on the dark bars at the bottom. Looking into 2023, over 60% of the playtime was spent on titles that are 6 years or more. And actually, we can explain this trend by looking at 2021 to 2022. That growth is explained by Fortnite becoming a 6+-year-old title, 6-year-old title. But it doesn't fully explain what happened in 2023. So looking closer into that year, we also noticed that new game playtime, or games that are less than 2 years old, also increased. So we were wondering, where is this playtime coming from? And the answer is actually from the middle bracket, from that 3 to 5-year-old titles. And when you look at the trend, you can see that for this bracket, playtime is substantially, it has a steep decline over the last few years. The jump from 21 to 22 can be explained again by Fortnite moving from one bracket to the 6+-year-old bracket. However, the jump from 24% to 16% is not explained by that. And this is explained mainly by the fact that those hours were split between the new games, titles that are less than 2 years old, and the mature games, titles that are six or more years old. So this tells us a couple of things. Number one is that playtime is a zero-sum game, and that hours have to come or are coming from other games. The second thing that you need to bear in mind here is that jumping that chasm of 3 to 5-year-old titles is quite hard. And this is mainly important or particularly important for live service games. In the next slides, we want to focus a little bit more on 2023, particularly on the new playtime, but also on the mature or older titles in the market. We will start with the latter. When you look at the top 5 titles that are part of the 6+-year-old bracket, you will notice that these 5 titles actually accounted for more than 25% of all the playtime in 2023. Those titles are Fortnite, Roblox, League of Legends, Minecraft, and Grand Theft Auto 5. These titles combined, they account to 27% of the total playtime in 2023. This number it's quite massive. And so we decided we should take a moment to look at the 2 performers up there, Roblox and Fortnite, and to understand the relationship between those titles, but also towards the rest of the industry and what the impact is. So when you look at Roblox and Fortnite, in terms of MAU growth by month, we wanted to scout for some patterns in how playtime behaves there. So if you look at the graph, actually 2023 remained quite stable. That was until November in the year where Fortnite launched Fortnite OG. And on the back of that, then they launched on December Lego Fortnite, Fortnite Festival, and Rocket Racing within the game. Now, that 16% that you see is additive to the fact that Fortnite already increased 60% in the previous month. I would like to zoom in there because knowing what we know now, that player share jumped so much, if you look into Roblox share in December, that only decreased 3%. So of course, there's some sort of player churn from one game to another for the nature of these games. But this tells us something more because not all of these players came from Roblox. And in fact, a lot of these players are coming from different games across the ecosystem. Why is this important? This is important because if you're looking at your studio strategy, if you're looking at your game, and you're thinking about launching a new game, when you look at your competitors, it is fundamental that you might think you're not, but you are competing with Fortnite and Roblox to some extent. Call it share of hours, maintaining player share, or gaining a new audience. It's a competitor, and this should be part of your release strategy. That completes the analysis for now for the older titles. And now let's jump back to our original chart. We would like now to zoom into the new titles, and that is new titles in 2023. Just to recap, I think it's good that we mention that, again, new titles are the games that were released during 2022 and 2023. And in 2023, playtime spent on new games increased to 23% of the total playtime in a year. That's good. However, over 60% of that playtime, that new playtime, was spent on new titles that belong to an annual franchise release. And those titles are the ones to the right. So Call of Duty Warzone, EAFC, NBA 2K, Madden, and the show, MLB The Show. So amongst these titles and a few others, this playtime accounted for 15% of the total annual playtime. The main point here being that when you're launching a game, or you're assessing your game performance in the market, these games or this player share should not be part of your addressable market, or it should be taken into the context. And that is because these hours are heavily entrenched. And it is very hard to compete and pull hours away from these titles because these are annual franchises with a current release. So then the question is, what is left? What is remaining for new launches? And the answer is 8%. The remaining playtime spent in new titles that they are not annual franchise releases made up 8% of the total playtime in 2023. And to the right, you have those top 5 games, so the top new releases by Playtime that are not part of an annual franchise. That's Diablo 4, Hogwarts Legacy, Baldur's Gate 3, Elden Ring, and Starfield. Collectively, these 5 games accounted for 3.5% of total playtime in 2023. I know these numbers may sound small and a little worrying. However, all these titles were highly successful, and even with that 8%, those games are making an excellent business out of it. For instance, Hogwarts Legacy is part of this bracket, and that was the highest grossing game of 2023. So it is possible to succeed in this market. So, in summary, gamers are clocking fewer playtime hours. Overall playtime is down significantly from the peak in 2021. Older titles capture increasingly higher share of playtime hours, and this doesn't seem to stop so far. Everyone is competing with Fortnite and Roblox. And when we look at new playtime, it is mostly captured by annual franchises. So, in conclusion, moving forward, and now we'll try to pivot the conversation into areas of opportunity, as we do believe there's a silver lining to all of this. So we wanted to explore some of the areas of opportunity where we see trends in monetization and some breakout games. So hopefully this becomes more of the happier part of the presentation. So staying on the new game playtime in 2023, so that 23% we talked about earlier, we will look at this at the time spent. However, we wanted to break down this into monetization methods. And what we found is that 90% of new game playtime in 2023 was spent on 48 titles. The largest share was commanded by live service pay-to-play titles. So think of your Call of Duty, NBA 2K, Diablo 4, amongst others. Then 16% of this share of playtime went to premium titles. 1% went to live service free-to-play titles, almost absent from the picture. The remaining 10%, it's we bundled that up into a group of 1,400 plus titles. But the fact that we did this doesn't mean that there are no successes here. For example, in this group, you can see games like Lies of P or Wulong Fallen Dynasty. And this is very interesting to look at the 90% of new game playtime in 2023. But we wanted to also flip that around and see what that means in terms of revenue. So when we look from the revenue perspective, we found that 90% of the game revenue new game revenue in 2023 was captured by 43 titles. That is 5 titles less than what we saw in Playtime. So this means that it is further consolidated. What stood out immediately is that in this analysis, premium games or premium titles doubled their share from playtime to revenue, from 16 to 32%. Live service free-to-play titles actually shrunk from 73% to 59%, and live service pay-to-play titles and live service free-to-play titles are actually absent from the picture, which means we couldn't find any live service free-to-play titles within that top 90% revenue. The takeaway here is that when you're launching a new game, you should consider your monetization strategy, of course, but that is also in terms of the market context and market performance. So always keep an eye on that. Now, these last two slides talked about new games and playtime and revenue. We would like to zoom a little bit more into the general outlook of revenue and how this was spent. So our revenue data for the US and UK shows that premium transactions accounted for the highest share of PC and console game revenue in 2023. That is 56% for PC and 57% for console. Microtransactions came in second, followed by DLC. And finally, subscriptions took the smallest share. It's worth mentioning that when we talk subscription, we're talking single game subscriptions like World of Warcraft or Final Fantasy. This excludes multi-game subscriptions. When we talk about premium revenue spent, this is not particularly exclusive to single player or standalone titles. Live service, pay-to-play games also have a large component of upfront monetization. The only difference is that they also monetize after via microtransactions. When you look at the overall share, I think there's a couple points here to mention. While competing with a live service pay-to-play title, so think an EAFC, it is very hard to compete with these games. There's still lessons we can take away from this type of games, and that is that monetizing upfront and after appears to be the resulting winning strategy for this type of games in the current market. Moreover, a second angle is that premium titles still pack quite a strong punch. And they continue to take a sizable portion of the market, and they're not going anywhere anytime soon. Next, we wanted to look at some of the breakout titles or breakout releases over the last 12 months to try to understand what are some of these common success factors. And when we look at the list in front of you, Baldur's Gate 3, Battlebit Remastered, Palworld, Lethal Company, The Finals, Ready or Not, and Helldivers 2. I think before we jump into the common success factors, it's worth mentioning that maybe besides Baldur's Gate 3, because of being part of the D&D universe, all of these titles, or most of these titles, have no major franchise behind them, which makes their breakout success even more relevant. So, first of all of these titles have a very focused, well-executed gameplay or gameplay loop, and they borrow from well-established paradigms in the industry. Second, these games moved into a gap left by AAA. So this is quite an important point. So for example, Battlebit Remastered stepped into filling the gap left by Battlefield, moving more into a hero shooter live service type of game with 2042. Ready or Not similarly did that with Rainbow Six Siege, and Baldur's Gate 3 moving into the isometric RPG left behind by AAA. I know a lot of people in the audience are going to probably tell me that it is not fully isometric, but you get the point. That type of games needed some love, and they step in, and it was a great success. Going on to point number 3, all of these games had some sort of have some sort of early access or very strong developing and community integration. So there's a lot of feedback happening between the community and developers, and this is integrated into the game. And then the community loves this, which leads us to number 4, is that this allows also that entertainment goes beyond the game itself. So all of these games are highly TikTokable, highly streamable. And the point here is that they can very much continue to be enjoyed outside of the game. So looking at all these breakout titles, we wanted to understand who are the players behind them, and what does this audience can tell us. We also wanted to understand if these players that are after these major successes, or like breakout successes, better said, are players that are sticking around, or are they moving to the next trend? And we try to answer this looking at our payer overlap index. We took Palworld, the first breakout success of 2024, as the base for our analysis. And we look at breakout titles that have a large MAU overlap with this game as a base. So it's everything above the dotted line. And the way payer overlap works is that it will tell us whether a player of our base game, Palworld, is likely to buy or more likely to buy another game. So in this case, a Palworld player is almost close to 16 times more likely to buy Enshrouded within the same platform. What this tells us further is that games like Party Animals, Baldur's Gate, Lethal Company, Ready or Not, that are all breakout titles, they also have a high overlap between them. And therefore, there's a strong cohort of players willing to play and chase this novelty in games, chase this hype. Moreover, when you look below the dotted line, we wanted to do a second analysis, and that is to understand how is this cohort, these players that are chasing the trend, relate to more of your typical high MAU recurring games and sports games. And in fact, this cohort is less likely to buy into sport games and somewhat neutral to Call of Duty. Clearly, these games do not share a high overlap with our comparison group. Now, what is the takeaway for you in this? Is that as a studio, if you're looking to launch, if you're looking into your game launch strategy, you should be probably asking yourself, how can I activate this player base? How will I attract these players into the hype cycle of my game and actually make them care and elevate my game? Another question then is, how will you retain them? And we know that these players, now we know that these players tend to jump from one trend to another. So if that is the case, once I attract them, do I have the cost structure and monetization model ready to move on from them? So with that, I realize I'm a little bit over time. So with that, I'm going to quickly summarize where are the areas of opportunity that pay-to-play live service titles and premium games seem to be the winning strategy for new releases. Polished gameplay and filling the gaps left by AAA are some of the drivers for breakout titles, and do attract trend chasers because they are willing to buy, play, and promote your game. So that concludes this section of the webinar. Now I'll welcome in Michael, my colleague. He's one of our senior analysts onto the screen to answer some of your questions. Oh, Michael, I think I cannot hear you.
It's always the mute button that gets me. Always the mute button. But thank you so much, Diego. And I know that there has been a lot of great conversations in the chat that I've been having. And some of the questions that we have here, Diego, is when it comes to those games capturing the 80%, those 66 titles, has those games remained flat? Has there been an increase or a decrease, or has that remained fairly static in those 66 titles?
That actually, I think we went over that, but actually, yes, when we look back at the last 2 years at least, that has been remaining quite flat. In fact, that's 1 or 2 games up and down. So that, yeah, that further confirms that there's a consolidation into fewer titles, and that still remains to be seen towards 2024.
Yep. And we'll have one last question here, just to suck up the last bit of time. How are games with new expansions and iterations reflected in the data? Are they accounted as from the original, or is it from the launch of the original? Is it from the expansion or the launch of the original game?
Okay. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Michael, but I think this is particularly from the release, the original release of the game. So when we did the analysis, in the context of that year, so say 2023, we looked at games that were released within 2 years, that 2-year time window, 3 to 5 year time window, and 6+ year from that analysis. I hope that answers the question well, or do we want to give a little bit more context?
No, that was perfect. It's from the original release, and it starts out from the 1 to 2 years that we were talking about.
Cool.
So that was perfect.
Cool. Perfect. I think that's the time we had. Sorry that I had to run a little bit over. So thank you, Michael. And again, thank you everyone for joining us today in this webinar. You will be receiving this recording and the presentation and also the Q&A next week. All the data used today is included on the free PC and console report you probably saw at first, at the beginning of this session. So this is available now also in the chat. Thanks again, and I hope to see you next time.